I have struggled with the weight of this for 14 days. There were moments when I thought I would take this to my grave, locked away in the silence of my own heart. But as a priest, I have spent my life telling my flock that when the Holy Spirit moves you to speak, you cannot stay silent, no matter how much you fear the judgment of men. My name is Father Nikolas. I am 37 years old, and I serve a small Orthodox parish in rural Pennsylvania. What I am about to tell you happened on April 3rd, 2026. It was Good Friday, just 2 weeks ago. My hands still tremble as I hold my prayer rope, trying to anchor myself in this world again. That afternoon, I received a call to visit a parishioner who was transitioning from this life. The roads were treacherous with late-season black ice and a blinding sleet. I remember the car beginning to slide. I remember the sight of the old oak tree rushing toward the windshield, and I remember a single prayer: Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Then the world vanished. There was no sound of metal twisting. There was no pain. I found myself standing in a realm that is impossible to describe with the limited tools of our earthly language. It was as if I had been blind my entire life, and suddenly, for the first time, my eyes were open to the true nature of reality. There was no sun in the sky, yet everything was bathed in a light that felt like it had substance, like a warm liquid that reached into the very marrow of my soul. I was standing on what felt like solid ground, but it was translucent, glowing with a soft inner radiance. I looked down at my hands, and they were not made of flesh and bone as I knew them, but of a shimmering, refined essence. I felt lighter than a breath, yet more solid and real than I had ever felt in my 37 years on earth. The exhaustion I had carried from the long Lenten services, the ache in my back, the constant hum of worry that lives in the back of a priest's mind, all of it was gone. In its place was a clarity so profound that I understood in an instant that the life I had left behind was merely a shadow of this true existence. Then I felt a presence. It was not like someone walking up behind you. It was like a sudden shift in the temperature of the room when a fire is lit. I turned, and there he was. I cannot tell you what color his hair was or the exact shape of his face, because to look upon him is to look upon the sun. You do not see the details as much as you see the glory. But I knew him. My heart recognized him before my mind could find a name for him. It was Jesus. He was wearing a simple robe that seemed to be woven out practiced light, and his presence was so overwhelming that I fell to my knees, burying my face in my hands. I felt a wave of such intense love wash over me that I began to sob. It wasn't the sobbing of grief, but the sobbing of a child who has been lost in a cold, dark forest for a very long time and has finally been found by his father. He didn't speak with words that hit the ear. His voice resonated within me, a sound like a great peaceful river. He said, "Nikolas, do not be afraid. Stand up. I have brought you here to see what is hidden." He reached down and touched my shoulder. That touch, it felt like every prayer I had ever prayed was being answered at once. It was a confirmation of everything I had taught, but 1,000 times more powerful. He lifted me to my feet, and I found the courage to look into his eyes. They were like deep wells of ancient wisdom and infinite mercy. There was no judgment in them, only a profound, aching love for everything he had created. The Lord then turned me toward a vast expanse that seemed to stretch out forever. "Look through my eyes, Nikolas," he said. "See the world as it truly is beyond the curtain of time and matter." Suddenly, the shimmering realm we were in seemed to become transparent, and I was looking down at the earth. But I wasn't seeing it like a map or a satellite image. I was seeing the spiritual life of the world. Every person on the planet was visible to me, not as a physical body, but as a flickering flame. Some flames were bright and steady, while others were dim, sputtering as if they were about to go out. And surrounding these flames were forces that made my heart turn cold. I saw what I can only call shadows, though that word is too weak. They were intelligences of malice, dark and heavy, moving through the streets of our cities like a thick, oily smoke. They didn't have human shapes, but they had human intentions. They were focused, directed, and tireless. I watched as they clustered around people who were walking alone, people who were angry, or people who were lost in their own pride. The Lord showed me a man sitting in a high-rise office in a major city. From the outside, he looked successful, powerful, and composed. But through the Lord's eyes, I saw that his heart was covered in old, jagged scars. These scars were wounds from his past, A father who never loved him, a failure he had never forgiven himself for, a deep-seated fear that he was actually a fraud. And there, pressed right up against those scars, was one of the dark forces. It wasn't whispering words into his ear. It was simply leaning. It was pressing on that old wound of inadequacy, warming it up, making it the loudest thing in the man's heart. I watched as the man reached for a document and made a decision that would hurt thousands of people. He thought he was being tough and practical. He felt a surge of cold satisfaction, thinking he was proving his worth to the world. But I saw the truth. He was being steered like a ship with a broken rudder, his own unhealed pain being used as the hook to pull him toward the darkness. "They do not know," I whispered, my heart breaking for the man. "Many do not." The Lord replied, "They have built their lives on things that pass away, and they have forgotten how to heal the wounds within. And because the wounds are open, the darkness finds a home." The vision shifted, and I was shown a woman, a famous journalist who was known for her sharp mind and her influence over the public's thoughts. I saw her in a newsroom, surrounded by screens and the constant rush of information. The atmosphere around her was a swirling gray fog. This fog was made of the collective anxiety and the frantic pace of the world. I saw the dark forces moving through this fog, finding the gaps in her integrity. They didn't need to make her tell a bold-faced lie. All they did was work on her desire for relevance. They nudged her toward the story that would get the most reaction, rather than the story that was true. They played on her fear of being left behind by the fast-moving culture. I watched as she crafted a narrative that would stir up anger and division among people who had previously lived in peace. She felt a sense of professional triumph as the numbers on her screen climbed higher. But I saw the spiritual cost. She was adding to the great fog that was blinding the world, and she was doing it because she was afraid of being small. I saw this pattern repeated over and over in every corner of the globe. I saw it in the hearts of activists who began with a desire for justice, but allowed the shadows to turn that desire into a burning hatred for their enemies. I saw it in the hearts of religious leaders who had become more concerned with their own power and the size of their buildings than with the souls of their people. The shadows were experts at finding the leaks in a human soul, the places where we haven't quite surrendered to God, and they were pouring themselves into those gaps. The Lord then showed me a vision of a great assembly of people, a crowd that seemed to represent the whole of humanity in this current age. They were all carrying heavy invisible packs on their backs. These packs were filled with the expectations of the world, the need to be seen, the need to be right, and the crushing weight of modern life. They were all looking down at small glowing rectangles in their hands, their faces pale and drawn. The fog I had seen earlier was thickest here among the common people. It was a fog of confusion. I saw that people were losing the ability to distinguish between a brother and an enemy. They were reacting to everything with a hair-trigger temper, their nervous systems frayed by the constant stream of alarming news and digital noise. In this vision, I saw the dark forces weaving a web between the people. Whenever someone posted a message of hate or shared a piece of information designed to provoke fear, a strand of the web would grow stronger. The goal was to isolate every person, to make them feel that they were the only ones who knew the truth and that everyone else was a threat. I saw how this isolation made them even more vulnerable to the leaning pressure of the shadows. "Lord," I cried out, "is there no one who sees? Is the whole world falling into this trap?" Jesus looked at me, and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "Look closer, Nikolas. Look at the light." I adjusted my spiritual vision, and I began to see pinpricks of brilliant golden light scattered across the map of the world. They were rare, but they were there. I saw a young mother in a cluttered house, exhausted, but pausing for a moment to pray for her children with a heart full of genuine, selfless love. Her light was like a lighthouse in the gray fog. I saw an elderly man in a hospital bed, dying in pain, but offering his suffering up for the sake of a world he was about to leave. His light was so bright, it made the shadows in the hallway shrink back toward the corners. I saw that these people of light were the only thing preventing the fog from becoming absolute. They weren't famous, they weren't powerful, Most of them didn't even realize they were part of a great spiritual army. They were simply people who had decided, in the quiet of their own hearts, to stay connected to the source of all life. They were the ones who refused to hate, the ones who chose to forgive when it was hard, and the ones who kept their eyes on the eternal rather than the temporary. The Lord moved his hand, and the vision of the world began to zoom in on a specific region. I saw the borders of nations, and I saw the tension building along them like an electrical charge. I saw the leaders of these nations meeting in secret, their faces etched with a grim determination. The shadows were thick in these rooms, whispering of national honor and the necessity of force. I saw that the world was sitting on a powder keg, and the shadows were playing with matches. The time you are living in now, the Lord said, is a time of great testing. The spiritual climate is changing, Nikolas. The forces that have been working in secret for a long time are now beginning to move more openly. You must tell the people that they cannot remain neutral. They must choose which atmosphere they will breathe. The fog of the world or the light of the Spirit. The Lord's hand remained on my shoulder, and as he spoke of the choice between the fog and the light, the vision beneath us shifted again. We were no longer looking at the borders of nations from a distance. We were suddenly inside the very heart of a modern home. I saw a family, a father, a mother, and 2 young children. They were sitting together in a beautiful, comfortable living room, but the spiritual atmosphere was anything but peaceful. I saw the children first. They were small, perhaps 7 and 10 years old. Each had a screen in their hands. Through the Lord's eyes, I saw that these devices were not just toys or tools. They were like conduits. I watched as a thin gray mist flowed out from the screens and wrapped around the children's hearts. It wasn't a mist of obvious evil, but of a profound, numbing distraction. It was a mist that whispered, "You are not enough as you are, and there is always something more exciting elsewhere." I saw how this mist was dulling their natural sense of wonder. The vibrant, gold-flecked light that usually surrounds the soul of a child was being suppressed, turned into a flat, metallic gray. The parents were only a few feet away, but spiritually they were miles apart. I saw the father's heart. It was filled with a swirling storm of numbers and schedules. The dark forces were pressing on his sense of responsibility, turning his natural desire to provide for his family into a crushing anxiety that left no room for the spirit. He was physically there, but his soul was pacing in a cage of what-ifs. The mother, too, was being pressed. I saw a shadow leaning on her need for comparison. As she looked at the lives of others through her phone, the shadow whispered that she was failing, that her life was small and dull. Her light was flickering, losing its warmth. Jesus looked at this family with a sorrow that I can still feel in my bones. "They are being starved in a land of plenty," he said. "The enemy does not need to bring them to a great sin to destroy them. He only needs to keep them from being present. If he can steal their now, he can steal their soul." He then moved my attention to the schools and the universities. I saw thousands of young people gathered in halls of learning. I saw the professors speaking from their podiums. In many of these places, the light was almost entirely absent. I saw the dark forces working through the very ideas being taught. They were weaving a philosophy that told these young people they were nothing more than accidents of chemistry, that there was no higher purpose, and that their only duty was to their own desires. I watched as this philosophy acted like a solvent, slowly dissolving the moral foundations of their souls. "They are being taught to build their houses on sand," the Lord told me. "And they are being told that the sand is rock. When the great rains come, they will have nothing to hold on to." I saw a vision of a young girl in a college dormitory. She was weeping, her face buried in a pillow. She felt a profound, aching loneliness, even though she had hundreds of friends online. I saw the shadows clustered thick in her room, feeding her thoughts of worthlessness. They were trying to convince her that her life was a mistake. But then, I saw a thin thread of light enter the room. It was coming from her grandmother, who lived 3 states away. The grandmother was awake in the middle of the night, praying the rosary. I watched as that thread of light touched the girl. It didn't make her problems disappear, but it acted like a shield. It pushed the shadows back just enough for her to catch her breath. She reached out and picked up a Bible that had been gathering dust on her shelf. The moment she touched it, her own flickering light grew steady. The shadows hissed and retreated into the corners. It was a small victory, but in the spiritual realm, it was magnificent. The vision expanded, and Jesus showed me the state of the church, not just my own Orthodox tradition, but all who call upon his name. This part of the vision was the most painful for me to witness as a priest. I saw magnificent cathedrals and humble storefront chapels. In some, the light was blindingly bright. These were places where the people truly loved one another, where the poor were fed not just with bread, but with dignity, and where the name of Christ was spoken with genuine trembling and joy. But in many other places, I saw something that made me want to cry out. I saw buildings that were full of people, but the spiritual atmosphere was hollow. I saw leaders who were performing a role, their hearts focused on the budget, the prestige, and the politics of their organizations. The dark forces were not attacking these churches. They were comfortable in them. They moved freely through the aisles, encouraging the gossip, the pride, and the coldness. I saw people leaving these buildings feeling more empty than when they entered, because they had been given a stone when they asked for bread. Many say, "Lord, Lord," but their hearts are far from me, Jesus said. His voice was not one of anger, but of a deep, fatherly disappointment. They have turned my house of prayer into a theater of self-importance. They use my name to justify their own hatreds and their own ambitions. They have forgotten that the path to the kingdom is the path of the cross, the path of humility. I saw a specific vision of a large church gathering where the speaker was talking about prosperity and success. I saw the dark forces leaning on the greed of the listeners, making them believe that God was a servant who existed to fulfill their earthly whims. I saw how this teaching was like a poison, making the people brittle and selfish. When a person in genuine need walked past them, they didn't even see him because their eyes were turned inward. But then, Jesus showed me a tiny, crumbling church in a forgotten village. There were only 6 people inside, and the roof was leaking. But they were praying together with such sincerity and such brokenness of heart that the entire building was glowing like a star. I saw angels standing at the doors and windows of that little church, guarding the holiness within. The prayers rising from that humble place were like pillars of fire reaching toward heaven. It is the remnant that holds the world together, Nikolas, the Lord told me. It is the few who are truly mine, who love without counting the cost, who keep the world from falling into total darkness. The Lord then shifted the vision to the natural world. I saw the forests, the oceans, and the mountains. I saw that the earth itself is alive in a way we do not understand. It groans under the weight of human sin. I saw how the spiritual darkness we produce affects the very land we live on. I saw places where great acts of violence had occurred, and the ground there felt heavy and cursed, as if the memory of the blood was still crying out. But I also saw places where saints had prayed and lived, and the trees and the water there seemed to hum with a quiet, holy joy. The creation waits with longing for the children of God to wake up, the Lord said. Everything you do, every thought you think, leaves a mark on the world around you. There is no such thing as a private sin or a private act of holiness. It all flows into the great river of life or the great swamp of death. Then the vision returned to the current moment. I felt a shift in the intensity of the light around us. Jesus showed me the month of April 2026, the very time I am living in now. I saw the world as if it were a woman in labor. There was a sense of mounting pressure, of a coming transition that cannot be stopped. I saw that the middle of April 2026 was a threshold. I saw the dark forces gathering their strength, preparing to move from the shadows into the light. I saw that the leaning I had observed earlier was becoming a shove. In the hearts of world leaders, the pressure to act out of fear and pride was reaching a breaking point. In the media, the fog was becoming so thick that it was almost impossible for anyone to see the truth through it. The harvest of choices is beginning, Nikolas, the Lord said. The seeds that have been sown for decades, the seeds of secularism, of pride, of division, are now coming to full fruit. And at the same time, the seeds of prayer and sacrifice are also reaching their maturity. The world will see the two kingdoms clash more clearly than ever before. I saw a vision of a great storm gathering over the nations. It wasn't a storm of wind and rain, but a storm of human spirit. I saw riots in cities, I saw the collapse of trust between neighbors, and I saw the leaders of the world standing on a precipice, their hands trembling as they reached for the instruments of war. The shadows were dancing with a terrible joy, believing their victory was at hand. But they forget, Jesus said, and his voice suddenly sounded like a trumpet, that I have already overcome the world. As he spoke, I saw a new vision. I saw the great resistance of prayer I had seen before, but now it was growing. I saw people who had been lukewarm suddenly catching fire. I saw a businessman stop in the middle of a busy street, moved by a sudden urge to pray for his country. I saw a teenager throw his phone onto his bed and fall to his knees, crying out for God's mercy. I saw these individual points of light beginning to connect, forming a net of gold across the dark parts of the map. I watched as this net of prayer acted like a filter. As the dark shove moved toward the leaders and the people, the net would catch much of the malice, neutralizing it. It didn't stop the storm, but it took away the storm's power to destroy everything. I saw that a single person praying in a hidden room could literally save a city from a disaster it didn't even know was coming. This is what I need you to tell them, the Lord said, looking deeply into my eyes. Tell them that the battle is not fought with words or with weapons of metal. It is fought in the silence of the heart. Tell them that their faithfulness in this hour is more precious than all the gold in the world. The middle of April is the beginning of a great revealing. Many will be terrified by what they see, but my people must not fear. They must be the anchors. The Lord's voice, which had been as powerful as a trumpet, softened once more into a tone of intimate, fatherly tenderness. He turned me away from the vast, turbulent map of the nations and brought my gaze back to the individual soul. It was as if we were zooming in from the cosmic to the microscopic, showing me that the great wars of the world are truly won or lost in the tiny, unseen chambers of the human heart. He showed me a man I recognized from my own neighborhood back in Pennsylvania. This man was someone I had often seen at the local post office, a quiet, unremarkable man named David, who worked as a mechanic. In the physical world, David looked weary. His skin was stained with oil that never seemed to fully wash away, and he moved with the slow gait of someone whose body was beginning to fail him after decades of hard labor. But through the eyes of the Lord, David was a giant. I watched David as he finished his shift at the garage. He was tired, and the dark forces were leaning on him, trying to provoke a spirit of resentment. They whispered to him about how little he was paid compared to the owners of the luxury cars he fixed. They tried to fan the sparks of his physical pain into a fire of bitterness. But David did something I will never forget. As he wiped his hands on a rag, he closed his eyes for a mere 10 seconds. In those 10 seconds, he didn't ask for money or for his pain to go away. He simply said in his heart, "Thank you, Lord, for the strength to work today. Please watch over the person who drives this car and keep them safe." In the spiritual realm, that simple prayer acted like a flash of lightning. It didn't just push the shadows back from David. It sent a ripple of light across the entire town. I saw that David's habit of small, sincere prayers had built a sort of invisible fortress around his soul. The shadows could lean all they wanted, but they couldn't find a single crack to enter. His humility was like a polished shield that reflected the darkness back upon itself. "Do you see, Nikolas?" the Lord asked. "The world looks for grand gestures and loud voices, but I look for the heart that is turned toward me in the middle of the mundane. David's 10-second prayer carries more weight in the heavens than 1,000 speeches made for the sake of vanity." Then, the vision shifted to show me the power of the holy mysteries, specifically the divine liturgy. As an Orthodox priest, I have stood at the altar hundreds of times, but I had never truly seen what happens from the other side. The Lord showed me a small wooden church during a Sunday service. I saw the priest, a man even older and more frail than I am, standing before the holy table. As he began the prayers of the epiclesis, asking the Holy Spirit to descend upon the gifts of bread and wine, I saw the roof of the church vanish in a burst of uncreated light. It wasn't just a metaphor. I saw a pillar of fire descend from the very throne of God and rest upon the chalice. And as the people came forward to receive communion, I saw that they weren't just receiving a ritual. They were being infused with the very life of the Creator. Each person who approached with fear, faith, and love became a walking sun. When they stepped back out into the world, the dark forces that were lurking in the parking lot and the nearby streets fled in terror. One person, properly prepared and united to Christ, was enough to sanctify an entire zip code. "This is the medicine for the world," the Lord whispered. "But many take it without realizing its power. They treat it as a habit of the flesh rather than a union of the Spirit. Tell my priests to serve with fear and trembling, for they are handling the fire of the Godhead." The Lord then showed me a vision of the middle of April threshold he had mentioned before. It was like a great divide in a river. On one side, the water was dark, thick, and choked with debris. This was the path of fear and the fog of the world. On the other side, the water was crystal clear and moved with an unstoppable force. This was the path of those who chose the light. I saw that many people were currently treading water at the fork, trying to decide which way to go. I saw the great revealing taking place right now in these very days of April 2026. I saw that the masks were falling off. People who had pretended to be virtuous but held hatred in their hearts were being exposed by the pressure of events. Systems that were built on greed and deception were beginning to groan and crack. I saw that the confusion in the media was not just a result of poor reporting, but a spiritual manifestation of the world's refusal to acknowledge the truth. "The light is shining in the darkness," Jesus said, "and the darkness cannot comprehend it. It tries to drown the light in noise, in anger, and in meaningless talk. But the light does not argue. It simply is. Your task, and the task of all who love me, is to simply be the light. Do not get pulled into the arguments of the world. Do not let the shadows make you angry, for anger is the door they use to enter. Stay in the place of peace." I saw a vision of a woman sitting in a coffee shop, scrolling through her phone. She was reading news that was designed to make her afraid and hateful toward her neighbors. I saw a dark presence sitting at the table with her, its hand on her shoulder, urging her to type a comment full of venom. But then, she looked up and saw a child laughing at another table. For a brief second, she chose joy over the screen. She smiled at the child and felt a surge of genuine warmth. In that moment, the dark presence was knocked backward as if by a physical blow. The woman didn't even know she had won a spiritual battle, but she had. She put her phone down and decided to call a friend she hadn't spoken to in years. "Every choice matters," the Lord told me. "The world is changed one kind thought at a time, one forgiven debt at a time, one moment of silence at a time." The Lord then showed me something that filled me with a holy awe. He showed me the cloud of witnesses, the saints and the departed faithful. I saw that they were not dead or gone in any sense we understand. They were more alive than I was. I saw them standing in a great circle around the earth, their hands joined in a continuous, rhythmic prayer that sounded like the humming of a vast hive. Their prayers were like a golden net that caught the most dangerous arrows of the enemy before they could reach the earth. I saw my own predecessor, Father Thomas, who had passed away 5 years ago. He was there, looking younger and more vibrant than I had ever seen him. He was praying specifically for our parish in Pennsylvania. I saw how his prayers were providing a layer of protection over our small church, helping me in ways I never realized. "You are never alone in the struggle, Nikolas," the Lord said. "The church is one. The living and the departed are one. When you pray, you are joining a chorus that has been singing since the foundation of the world. Remember this when you feel small and forgotten. You are part of a kingdom that cannot be shaken." As the Lord spoke these words, I felt the realm of light beginning to fade. The overwhelming presence of Jesus was still there, but it was becoming more of a brilliant interior glow rather than something I saw with my eyes. I felt a pulling sensation, as if a great weight were being attached to my feet. I knew it was time to return to my broken body. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in that peace forever. I wanted to remain at the feet of the Lord where everything made sense and nothing was painful. I think he sensed my reluctance because he looked at me one last time with a look of such profound encouragement that it felt like he was pouring a bucket of strength into my soul. "Go, Nikolas," he said. "The time is short and the harvest is great. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them that I am with them, even to the end of the age, and tell them to pray. Not because they have to, but because it is the very breath of life." Then, with a sensation like falling through a long, dark tunnel, I felt a sudden, sharp pain. It was the pain of a chest being compressed and the cold air of a hospital room rushing into lungs that hadn't breathed in minutes. I opened my eyes and saw the fluorescent lights of the ICU. I saw the faces of doctors and nurses, their eyes wide with shock and relief. I heard the rhythmic beeping of machines, a sound that felt so harsh and artificial after the music of the heavens. I couldn't speak for a long time. I just lay there. The memory of his eyes burned into my mind. The doctors called it a near-death experience, brought on by the trauma of the accident. They spoke of brain activity and oxygen levels. I listened to them with a quiet sadness, knowing that they were describing the shadow while I had seen the sun. It has been 2 weeks since that Good Friday. My body is still healing, and I move with a cane, but my spirit has never been more awake. I have spent these days in constant prayer, trying to hold on to the clarity I was given. I look at the world now, and I see the fog he spoke of. I see the leaning shadows in the news reports and the bitterness on the faces of people in the streets. But I also see the light. I see the great resistance happening in the hearts of the humble. I know that the middle of April has passed and we are now in the time of the revealing. The pressures are real and the stakes are higher than most people can imagine. But I am not afraid. How can I be afraid when I have seen the one who holds the stars in his hands? I am going back to my work. I am going to keep being a priest and doing the thing I was called to do. And I am going to keep praying every single day, which is not something I did with any regularity before this, but which I have not missed a single morning since. Thank you for reading all of this. I know it is long. I needed it to be long because the experience was long and the details matter. If even one part of what I have shared here lands in the right place, in the heart of someone who needed to hear it, then the discomfort of speaking publicly about something so personal and so difficult to explain will have been worth it. Wherever you are, whatever you believe about any of this, I hope you are safe. I hope something here was useful to you. And if you are a person who prays, please do not stop. Please do not treat it as something small. It is not small. I was shown that it's not small.